Hello everyone. Okay, well I promised I'd stream over the weekend and as usual failed. But partly I was busy. Partly I just wanted to see how the week ended and if it gave me any more clarity with the weekly close, and it sort of did but didn't. So, okay, where to start? Right. I was looking for a weekly close that gave us a weekly demand. We got that on CME earlier, so I knew that was happening. We got it later on the BTC pair, and just I'll fix this line on the Korea pair. But Korea's been interesting, and then again that was another reason that I wanted to hold off, because you can see here that Korea was more bearish over the weekend. Compare that structure here to this structure here. I might just hide my alerts actually, because otherwise they end up being a distraction. Yeah, so Korea had made a 12-hour supply over the weekend, and whereas the BTC pair hadn't, sorry, the US dollar pair hadn't. It then did come through it, swing failed it, and then flipped it into a daily supply a bit later, and then dropped off quite hard off that this morning. But in the meantime, the US dollar pair was still sort of around those highs and didn't drop off anywhere near as hard in the Asia candle, as you can see here, and held the lows, which is kind of annoying because I wanted it to come down and that would give me more help really. On that basis, like because of that, I was then looking at what, you know, levels to pick for long entries, possible long entries. So in my previous update, I had these two as local longs, so the 12-hour demand there. I'd also said there was a fair chance we were going to take out these lows, which we did. So the wick came down and it hit this daily level, but my final sort of lowest entry was a bit lower than that. Oh, it's on the 12-hour and 8-hour demand. I think I put in the comment on the alert that it could bounce off the daily, but wanted a bit lower and or even down at this zone here, because this was an hourly which CME left a gap, and it wicked and almost filled the gap here, but not quite. So I thought there was a chance it could come down and fill the gap. And then with Korea closing more bearish, so I've left these measurements on here because that's what I was just starting to look at last night before I went to bed. I was like, if Korea dropped from here down to its new weekly, that'd be 2.6%, which would then take the US dollar pair down into that 8-hour demand, and CME also down to potentially fill the gap. So there was quite a nice confluence on that, and there still is. Like, it's just because we've gone up now doesn't necessarily mean we're going to stay up. I then remeasured it again this morning, having seen the initial drop, to see, you know, what percentage at that point. It was a 1.7 drop to the weekly for Korea, and then this would have just taken out the low on the US dollar pair. So both of those were kind of nice, but have not at this point played out. So I'm going to just delete them for now. And obviously we've now just had this early up move, but because it's Monday, I want to be slightly more wary of it. It's come up and hit this clean resistance here on these wicks at this point, and there's a 5-minute supply right above that. On the short side, obviously we've got this 12-hour zone up here, but the structure is still bullish. So overall, with all the little scalp entries I'm giving, so we had this 2-week supply. Maybe I'll just hide some things so you can see it. So we had this 2-week supply, we tapped it, but then we came up a lot higher inside it. I have a feeling this low was for this tap, so I think it didn't react that much off it, but reacted a bit. And then we pushed up quite high inside it, and we've come right to the top levels. But in the meantime, it's also flipped into a 3-week demand. So, and now we're testing that 3-week demand. So the supply is weak and the demand is weak. So, and really that's just why we're just seeing a range at these levels. I also commented in the group and in the chat, you know, that 72k had a massive wall, still has a massive wall on Binance, and it did have one on Coinbase, but I think that one's been removed now. But in the meantime, yeah, so whilst we're in this 2-week supply, we've now made this into a 3-week demand, this level, so I've deleted the supply, but I'm just not considering either of them too strongly at the moment. And now we've made a weekly demand here, but again, weak because it's an inside bar. So what you can find is when you have a weak demand or supply, two things can happen in my experience: that you can either test and tap off the top of it, then swing fail the high of the candle that created it, so the high of this green candle, swing fail there and then drop, or you can go straight through it, swing fail the low of it, and then come back up for the bigger move. So weekly aren't overly reliable, but always worth watching in case you get that first scenario where it just taps off the top, takes out the high, and then you get a drop. And in this case, it also sort of conforms to the inside bar, an inside bar strategy, which, so this candle is an inside bar, i.e. it lies entirely inside that candle. If the next candle then comes up and takes out the high and closes back inside, you can then expect it to take out the low. So in this case, there is a chance we're going to take out the low. And there's people who trade that strategy, so we could come down. And take out the low doesn't necessarily mean swing fair, it just means go through it, or it can just mean go through it. So there is still a chance we go below the 66.5 level based on that, but it's not something I'm really particularly willing to trade right now, or not where price is at right now, because there's too much other demand. There's just a mess going on in here, so it's a little bit challenging. And what I really want to say is see Bitcoin starting to retrace now, just see if this move is like a fake move for Monday. So we've got that weekly demand. We've got a 5-day demand that I also had alerted, which got tapped the previous week and held as support. We also put in a 4-day up here, and this is also the challenge I'm having with a lot of alts, that we have a lot of 5 days, 4 days, 3 days because of all the choppiness, and thus it makes it A, hard to choose levels, and B, just messy. So I'm kind of trying to stay a little bit away from that, but I like to keep the levels in just in case they do something when I'm unaware of. So we don't have much on the 3-day, 2-day and daily, nothing new. But overall, obviously, we're holding this upper section, this upper range, and above this 3-week level. So while we're here, I'm still relatively bullish for a breakout. However, I always like to trade in both directions, and I still look at supply where I might see a reaction. I did previously alert up here for this 4 hours. This is the last 4 hour, which would mean taking out that high. Still slightly dubious on structure, I guess. Okay, I mean, really it is a range. We held this zone, which is what I wanted, this red box. We're still holding the all-time high, this red level, as support now. So there's various things that are promising, but then also we are at the top of the range, and there's, you know, we're looking at, if we look at the waves, we're looking at here, retest, breakdown. So yes, this can be a deviation, a fairly deep deviation below the red box, but this can also follow a structure where we go lower high, lower low. So there's kind of lots of different factors at the moment, but I don't want to go with the lower low factor until I actually see some supply reject. So we've got that here, but we have left these equal highs, which again confuses the situation more. So there are lots of different factors, which does make it a bit challenging on the higher time frames until you start to see things break or break out. And then just to remind anybody who hasn't watched before, if we do break up one of the zones I'm looking at, I need to do more analysis up for what I could project a top to be, but initially 113 to 127 is an interesting zone, because if we look at previous, like the previous all-time high, for example, or both of them in fact, so what was I measuring here? Yeah, so I'm measuring this drop, and then when we came up, we rejected the 127 on the final move, and the same here. We have this drop, and then we came up and we rejected between the 113 and 127, and 113 is referred to as the failed wave in harmonics. So it's just a zone I want to be aware of if we go up there, and again, you're not just blindly shorting 76 to 80 or 76 to 78, but is there anything that happens in this zone that makes you think you can do it, you can look for a short. And we should also check Korea at that point as well, because when we did have the top in March 2021, was it? Korea was a good indicator of when it was the final end, because Korea hadn't taken out the high, and when Korea did, then the whole market dropped. It was all ready to drop. But in the short term, excuse me, in the short term, I'm looking to hold very bullish, hold this 12 hour, so that where I originally wanted to long, I've got all the wicks that are just tapping off the top of this 12 hour. Failing that, we do have this weekly below. But just be conscious of that, what I commented before, the weekly inside bar, the possibility that it could come out down and take out this side, given that took out the high. It actually didn't quite on BitMEX, I don't think, but I think a lot of the other exchanges it did. Took out the high here, we could take out the low here, and it would be the low that's responsible for that high. So lots of factors, but yeah. Looking inside this 12 hour, I think there's a 1 hour a little bit higher in there, so just keep in mind this is a zone, not necessarily a level for shorting. Possibly short in here, possible short on the 4 hour up there, and then if we break all-time high, cross that bridge when we come to it. On the long side, like I say, I'd still like this 8 hour ideally to be tested and hold, and then we've got the weekly. So I think I've set alerts. I can't remember where my alerts are set now. Don't always have them. It does put a little black thing on the bar, but if I've been setting some, so I keep running out, I've been setting some of the other methods, so I don't necessarily get the alert. But I think I've alerted this weekly, and then looking for just a test of that low, and or potentially coming into this 8 hour area and just see if that holds if we do come down. We have just created an 8 hour demand here, but we're coming back to test it quite quickly, so a little unsure what's going on here, but just let Monday play out a bit more. And would have been nice also if Monday had taken out this low from the weekend, from Sunday, but it didn't. Okay, so, and then like I say, on Korea, slightly more bearish, just local structures anyway. So Korea in general is quite a lot lower, and it didn't flip this 2 week into a 3 week demand. It didn't flip the 2 week supply, but does have this weekly demand in here, like the US dollar pair. So again, I wouldn't mind this to test a bit lower to then potentially look for better longs on the US dollar pair, and if it comes down into this 8 or 12 hour demand there, well, there's an 8 hour at the first blue line that's more aggressive, and then a 12 hour in there with the weekly below. So if it comes down into this area, then I'd look for longs on the US dollar pair at that point. But just bear in mind that this is generally more bearish. I did the similar box for the highs there, but we've come off a 5 day supply up here, and this could retrace more significantly. So again, if we are looking at this as an ABC wave, and I always say I'm not an Elliott expert, but if that's a B wave correction, it's possible that this is the ABC and it's done. But if this is a larger B wave, and it wouldn't surprise me too much, because I just don't think we've seen that much buy interest. Like, we've had some from the ETFs, but not really as much as I would like, to be honest. But then the C wave so we can have two forms of C wave. It can either be a zigzag or it can be a triangle, and there's very simplistic Elliott waves. But so we're looking for a C wave to either fall down potentially into this area. Sure, it can come here if it's very aggressive, but the other possibility is that it comes down much deeper, so just be aware of that. And then on the bigger picture, we're still looking for this zone to hold, the red box on both Korea and the US dollar chart. So US dollar, if it does go a bit lower, I didn't comment on that really. We do also have this weekly down here, and I've talked about it before. It's got a daily inside. The daily is preferable from a fib perspective. 61 being down here, 70 being down here. We've got trend line stops, so there's a lot going on. But initially, I'd be looking at the 63 to 64 area for the more aggressive possible bounces, and then failing that down here. Again, cross that bridge if we come to it. I think most of that aligns reasonably well with the CME pair. I think CME also had the 2 week supply. Yeah, so the difference with CME is it had the 2 week supply and it has come all the way up into it, but again, not all the way through it. But the 3 week demand it left is quite a lot lower, down at the 64 level, which coincides with the weekly demand on the US dollar pair. So, like I say, don't be surprised if we come back through this weekly, because it's an inside bar and because it's a weak one. But initially we're looking for that to hold. What else? I think that's pretty much all my thoughts on Bitcoin at the moment in isolation, because there's some other factors that I'll talk about which are quite interesting. And then yeah, as I've talked previously, we've got the US dollar dominance chart, and again, this didn't really give me anything definitive, despite the rise on Friday in conjunction with the drop on Bitcoin, and obviously drops on alts. But a lot of alts have just fallen down into demand. Some have broken, the weaker ones obviously, and the stronger ones have held. So again, just a real mixed bag on alts, which is nice, but it means you can trade both directions freely. US dollar dominance is still just in this range. It did create a 5-day just closing this green candle over there, but not really, again, a definitive one, and still being under daily supply here, so it makes it just, again, slightly challenging. It's got 12-hour demand at the bottom, so if it does fall down into here, that's where I'd look for the equivalent shorts on Bitcoin. And if that holds, then we're looking at probably a fairly dire crypto market. We do have a daily just below that hasn't been tested, so again, like, it's possible if Bitcoin comes up and wants to take out that 72k wall, that we get a fall into here. And remember, I'm overly bullish on this, like, while I'm still waiting for the lower time frames, you know, and when we say lower, we're still on daily, 3-day, weekly, you know, they're lower, to confirm this. I'm bullish on US dollar dominance because of the 6-month chart. So we have 6 months demand here. So this is why I'm, like, overly nervous of what the crypto market may do. It can come deeper into the 6 month demand, and that's kind of what we're assessing at the moment, particularly because it's got a stacked one here, so it wouldn't surprise me if it comes down lower. And then if we look at lower time frames, we've got a 2-week demand in here, a bit lower. So there's various reasons that it doesn't necessarily have to hold where it's currently bounced, the first bounce. But we're looking on the weekly to try and get that higher low. Are we going to put in a higher high now, potentially get up into the monthly supply? It's a reasonable place for it to bounce. So yeah, I do think, and I've said many times, be wary of your longs, you know, even if this doesn't, you know, take off to the moon based on the 6 months, because, you know, if 6 month really plays out, then we expect this to make a higher high. That would be what I would normally expect. But obviously the market is not necessarily in the same place as it was when it was creating this demand down here with the ETFs, etc. So, but at least I would like to see it come up into this monthly supply and or that top section, just to see what the reaction is, and just see maybe if we just get a bigger triangle being put in here, if the bulls do win this battle. Yeah, so that's US dollar dominance. And so locally, I'm really just looking for this to try and make a proper demand or supply if it's going to fail. It's now got weekly supply above and daily supply above. I'll put my lines back on it. So we've got the big blue zone, which is the weekly above. So, you know, it may not get, even if it does bounce now and we get a bit more of a drop on Bitcoin, it's not going to go necessarily very far very quickly. But just don't forget there's that overarching 6 month that's holding up this whole consolidation now. The July close will be interesting as well, because potentially, you know, it could make, if it makes a 2 month supply at July, if it closes under here, sorry, at the end of June, then I'll be obviously more bearish again. But just looking for that 2-month close, what it's going to do. And let me have a quick look at the totals. I just realised that you can have favorited watch lists. Did not know that. We'll have a quick look at GBTC and all the other ETF charts are very similar. I'm just looking still at that possibility of, are we going to get a double top or are we getting another breakout? It's fairly simple. But again, still holding that local structure here. Still has the same 12-hour supply above. Has the swing failure of these highs, so this just still do have a bit of a risk. So you're really watching if that 12-hour gets tested. It's almost tested, in fact, on this GBTC chart. But on the US dollar chart, like if we get a rejection there, then I think it's worth holding for a possible bigger drop. But again, still bullish while we're still holding this local demand. ETHE was interesting as well, just from the Grayscale perspective. Again, it just can't seem to get over this level, so it's kind of interesting. We had sort of some meme kind of couple of wicks not showing on all time frames that came down through here, but again, ETHE needs to hold here to take off, but did also make monthly demand down here just on the swing failure and has a gap above, so there's still hope for ETHE. And remember, I commented on this back in April, I guess, that we were looking at this test of the monthly demand down here after the initial drop, and that was a really nice indicator. It took a while to play out, became a nice trend line, and eventually we got the pump. So do keep an eye on that on the Grayscale charts, just for usefulness for lead indicators. So again, this has daily supply above, and it's got this new monthly below with a gap fill, so there is the possibility this comes down lower, although actually I'm not bearish on ETHE right now, so but just be aware of these things. Quick look at totals. So obviously total 1 looks much the same as Bitcoin. Don't know if I've updated these. Okay, it didn't create a weekly demand like Bitcoin did. And it's just real chop in this range, but holding above that high, which is where that chart has found support. Not much to report on that, just a little bit weaker, still got the 12-hour supply above, but again, still holding that local range. So I'm looking for the possibility of supply to start rejecting to see if we're going to get a drop down to these lower levels. Perfect world, we get the rejection off here. Total 2, so with including ETHE, looks slightly more ropey, and again that's the other sort of concern of ETHE, that we've got now this 3-day supply, and I think that's probably a 4-day that's confirmed now as well. Yeah, so we've got 4-day supply and 3-day supply immediately above on this now, and a possibility of a decent sized drop down to that weekly demand, and again not a strong weekly demand. Due to the fact that it has yet been unable to break supply, and we've got a 2-week supply in there. So, but still just needing to see how this triangle plays out, because so a lot of alts are in a similar situation like this, and I need to go back and run through, and I feel like that most of them are still, maybe not with that bounce, but are still kind of here. I had some break, but they're some of the ones that I've been much more aggressive on, like for example entries in an equivalent to kind of here. I think some have come through or come deep into this zone, but I don't know how many have broken it as yet. And then we've got the majors, which I think I'll probably do a separate video on rather than sticking it all in here, but a lot of them just didn't even get past this point, so they've now wicked down from here. So it really is the strength of your retest, but this is potentially still a retest, and that's still a possibility. So just be careful. Total 3, so now we're excluding ETHE as well as BTC. So again, didn't create a weekly demand, and now has 4-hour supply. So it came off the 4-hour supply, so it was just weaker in general. The alt market was weaker in general. still in weekly demand here, could still get the alt market picking up from this weekly demand to get up into this weekly supply. That was my only concern, again, I think from the analysis I've done previously, that obviously you prefer prices to get back up into proper supply before seeing a drop, because then it becomes slightly difficult to know if the market's just weak and therefore hasn't gone that high, particularly if there's another supply right below like there is here on the 4-day. Or whether it's due another wave, which makes the challenge. And then others, which is the excluding the top 10. I've seen somebody exclude US dollar tether from this chart. I assume it's not in there, but I don't know, maybe I shouldn't be assuming that. But I don't know, I don't find it's particularly skewed, the analysis anyway. But again, you can see the weakness once we exclude the top 10. Again, there's a weakness, so it's come off this level here, but not managed to get up into the weekly supply up here, or even the 4-day, 5-day below. And yeah, as I said, also just a real mix with some of them having gone through this, very few. A handful have gone through this area, but mostly where they didn't have as strong a structure here. Quite a lot are just in this area. And then the majors and the older stuff tends to be here somewhere. So again, I don't know if we're going to get that run late on the old majors. Somebody commented that earlier today, that maybe that would happen. Yeah, or whether this is just simply weaker and we're going to get that drop down. But either way, I would like to see this monthly tested for alts. DeFi is probably going to show me much the same thing. DeFi did have a lot more weakness on this drop, but then still didn't manage to make it all the way down into demand. So again, yeah, like these structures, to me, I would generally be looking for shorts warily with this weekly, but to come through into the lower zones based on that structure. BTC dominance still reasonably strong. Hasn't made a new weekly demand, but it just has this sort of 2-week supply, which is thinking about running through. It did hold. I think there was a risk this was going to create a monthly supply in here, but it didn't. It managed to rescue itself just before the end of May. But yeah, dominance still relatively strong. ETH dominance has weakened off, and I'll get to ETHE. Others dominance has weakened off a lot, and is now falling through this monthly. And again, I would like to see that down back on this annual level in a perfect world. Whether I get that, I don't know, but at least, yeah, now this is not necessarily when I think you should be looking for major longs on alts. Yes, we might get a swing failure here, but again, I'd rather see that come into this zone, and I would still rather see a potentially final wave down on alts before thinking about more longs. And that's also not even to mention the fact that this could still be wanting to retrace much deeper down here. But the dominance charts I don't love anyway. I'd rather look at others for that. And others, to be fair, I've already talked about this, but I also did want down here. That would be quite a big drop in alts at this stage. So maybe that's, you know, it's crypto and there is no reason it won't do that. But it's still indecisive, you know, like overall we've got the monthly supply up here, which is what we're fighting with, and that's why I would like to see it at least push down properly into monthly demand. But then you can look over here and you can see that, you know, once it's started, it can just take off. So maybe we are at that point. And that gives me a good segue into the ETHE chart, actually. So let me show you that quickly. Let's put this back to where it normally is, the US dollar chart. So did we get that test? Yeah, so I will do a bit of analysis later and see those percentages again. And this is just so I can get the precision, just to see if we get this rejection here or even slightly higher in this 12-hour on Korea. If we get that drop down into the weekly, what the percentage difference would be, and therefore where would the US dollar pair be at the same time. But like I said, we're looking in that general vicinity. Okay, ETHE. So ETHBTC, again let me hide, so you can see where I've circled this area. So for a long time I've been comparing the broadening wedge that we're kind of making now with this broadening wedge that we had back here. And I possibly slightly jumped the gun on it because I was sort of noticing it even very, very early on in here. And it's actually taken a lot longer to play out. But you can clearly see the similarities in structure here. So we've had a drop, it's trying, it's failing, it's trying again, and then it fails bigger. So again, we've had this drop, we've had it try, it's trying again, dropped again, and now we've had this failure. So now the critical point we're at now is this going to morph into this. And I found that one thing I was just noticing at the weekend is the timing's really interesting. So for what it's worth, but it's just because we do get those seasonal, although I think I said somebody, well, I thought was traditionally down in the second half of the year, and I think they showed me something that said that wasn't the case, so not something I've really looked at. But from just looking at 2019, and the reason I look at 2019 as well, I should probably just say, is because one of the things, like if we hadn't had the ETF influence, one of the things I always wanted was, get back to Bitcoin, was for us to having this correction, then this B wave, and then the C wave, perhaps without the dramatic COVID drop. But that's kind of what I wanted here, that we had this A. I mean, it's possible this is A, B, C, and I suspect that's what Elliott wave people will say when we had an expanded B wave here. But I really would have liked to have seen something more than this coming off this major supply here. But then this was the exact point the ETFs brought in. And just on the ETF note, actually something that's quite interesting, that the ETFs really ramped up their buying on this candle, and they've also really ramped up their buying on this candle. So I'm quite interested to see if they are buying the top. Or you know, or are they? Is it enough? Because people keep talking about the ETFs like they're institutional entities, but again, like my understanding isn't great. But I'm assuming they are clients or random retail customers who are buying into the institutional ETFs. It's not the ETFs like they're some all-seeing, like omnipotent entity that's doing the buying. They are buying for people. This is what I assume. Anybody feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but so thus I assume it's just retail traders with more money making decisions. So that doesn't make them any more or less, like any less likely to buy the top as any other retail trader. So I'm kind of interested to see, you know, if we do suddenly go up to 100, you know, 100,000, 200,000, a million up here, like some people are calling, or whether we're just going to have seen ETFs be buying this last section here and be buying the top before we come back down here and actually give people a real entrance, a real proper entries. But yeah, so part of the reason I was comparing to here is like comparing that period and that broadening wedge on ETHBTC is because of this period, 24th of June. So, and again, it's interesting because of the exact date. So we go down on the daily. So, and also relatively similar structure here. It's obviously different to the left, and it's different from where it's coming from, but locally we've got a relatively similar structure. But the bottom here, or it's a week before, so it had a week more consolidation than we've had here. We've only just had the drop, but then Sunday the 9th of June was the 9th of June yesterday. We have a similar structure in that we've got this, I think this was a 12-hour and this is a daily supply above, which didn't do much, admittedly, on the retest in this case. And then we had this run until the 26th of June, so that's another couple of weeks before the actual top. And what's interesting is that coincides quite nicely with this Ether comparison. So, I thought I added the Ether, so if we add Ether and Bitcoin onto here, just make them log so it's a bit easier to see. So this is the broadening wedge type thing that I'm looking at, and this is where I just pointed out on the Bitcoin chart. So I'm wondering, you know, are we going to get now this big move, big final move on BTC and ETHE while we see that continued drop on ETHBTC? In fact, I mean, that continues to drop even after the drop, because then ETHE comes down significantly harder. But it's possible we've had this pump last week on ETHBTC, and it's possible we're now going into this sideways and deciding whether we are going to go up. And it has, you know, a similar structure. It kind of looked like it had broken, but it hadn't broken the last down move, which is the same as current. And then 9th of June is kind of where we're at now. Similar. Before we get these breakouts that then take out that 72k level on Bitcoin and the high on Ether, wherever that is at the moment, 4k probably. But yeah, so I just found that as an interesting observation. Hence why I'm saying be wary of the shorts that I've got in. So when we go back to that Bitcoin chart, so I've got similar shorts on Bitcoin and Ether, but do bear in mind, you know, we are still in an uptrend, and that if we do get a play similar to what happened that year, this and this are just going to get blown out of the water. But anyway, it was just an observation here. Overarchingly, I stick with the same analysis on Ether until I haven't seen enough. So while that's a really nice pump, we've seen many very nice pumps fully retrace, even a nicer pump there, going all the way back down eventually. But even the more recent ones, that was obviously a bigger one, but the more recent ones that we've had here, have all ended up retracing. From a supply-demand perspective, I said in my last update, you know, I wanted to see this 4-hour test ideally at the same time that Ether hit the monthly level. It's wicked down into there, it hasn't quite hit the level. Then we've got a 2-week demand below and a daily inside it, so it does have support below, but like I say, it resembles the 2019 structure. And also, even if we look at this structure on its own, that's the last down move, hasn't broken there, it's still in a downtrend. On top of that, if you look at the higher time frames, we're also in a massive 3-month supply here. In its favour, we had Ether dominance come off a monthly zone down here, although this has only hit a daily, and in its favour it did close slightly over that monthly level, but again we saw close, well, even this candle closed slightly over this monthly level and it just did absolutely nothing, so it's not really significant enough. But let's take my lines off. So I remain bearish despite this big pump, but I would just obviously conscious of seeing the reaction on this 4-hour, but again looking for, are we going to get a higher low, higher high? So, you know, we had this pump back in January, we came down, we did manage to make a higher low, but then failed to make a higher high. So it's still very possible it does the same thing here, even if I ignore the fact that this similar structure back in 2019 just died from there. So lots of different factors, but Ether on the other hand, so again, what I was commenting on in my last update, we have this new monthly demand in here, we have this giant pump before it, so we don't really want to start retracing that pump. We had this monthly demand, and then we also had a 3-week made just below that. But really what I wanted to see was, so I was looking at, I think there was a last demand in here before, assuming the swing failure had already happened, or if we took out that but closed back inside, and that is what's happened. So I've now drawn a red box similar to how I've always had that with Bitcoin at this 8-hour demand in here. So the small 8-hour, that's the zone that I wanted to hold. That is the zone that we're holding so far. So you've had plenty of time to get in here based on if you're trading top of this monthly. I threw in another alert. So on Bitcoin this morning I didn't have any new alerts because I just wasn't sure. Let me go back. Come on, computer. So yeah, so I had 3 levels I was looking at in on the detail chart. You know, we did take a fairly big wick through all of them, but that's reality. I was looking for a swing fail of this level at the lowest, this orange level, and then we had the monthly and then the annual level in here, so there's sort of 3 major levels to expect a bounce on. Then this morning I was like, just look for this retest of the monthly here, see what we get, and we actually had a fairly good reaction off it. Bitcoin I was looking for lower, like I say, on the basis of what Korea was doing, and also just on the basis of what Bitcoin normally does. It normally just retraces more deeply. I think I've now moved the fib, but if the fib was there as of this morning, we normally would go down to the 61.78 golden zone in here. And then given we have this weekly level there as well, I was just, yeah, and just various 5-minute and 3-minute in here, I was a bit reluctant to put a more aggressive entry. We did have a 15-minute, which is where it's bounced, and there was a 10-minute just underneath it, but it becomes, when I'm looking at that low time frame, it becomes so many different levels, I just feel like I'm re-guessing, so I end up just not putting a level in, because I don't want to mess anybody up. And like I say, there's still, I think, an argument for coming down a bit deeper, taking out that low, you know, refilling a lot more of this wick. Whether we go up to the 12-hour up here first, I don't know. It's my phone telling me to exercise. And yeah, so, oh, wow. Ether did come down and close actually underneath the 12-hour, which wasn't great, but it has followed Bitcoin in the pump, which is welcome. So yeah, nice entry on that. And then Ether above, as I've said, yeah, so the difficulty with Ether now is while we've got this monthly demand, we do have 4-day supply. So I have put 2 sort of provisional possible shorts. This 4-day one is 4-day and 3-day supply, and I've said it is aggressive, and the 61 fib is just in there. So I think, and Ether has been respecting the 61 quite a lot now, so I think it's a level worth watching in case we're going to see some weakness. But again, for the moment, we remain strong. We remain on monthly demand. We've swing failed into a 5-minute demand or 3-minute or whatever that is right below it. Again, we want to hold this red box, much like we saw for Bitcoin on the previous drop. I'm going to delete the big eye, so I had a 4-hour box, and I want that 4-hour, I don't know, I don't think I want the 4, I had a 4-hour box and an 8-hour box, but I think I prefer the 8-hour box, the lower red here. But yeah, so that's the zone I want to hold. If we break this zone, then I'll start looking more vehemently for shorts. And then, as I say, we've got sort of 3-week, and I've talked about this before, so I've got a 5-minute level inside this 3-week. It's the last level at the top of the initial impulse, so it's always something worth watching, although it's highly tentative and highly risky. Also closer to the 61, but maybe it's better to the 61, yeah, so it's close to the 61 on the linear chart, so again, something worth watching. And then failing that, we've got various daily zones all the way at the bottom of this green candle, but obviously if we're bullish, we don't really want to be retracing the whole green candle, and really if we're bullish, we want to be holding the top of this monthly. But I can't be bearish whilst we're on this monthly, so I guess we'll see. Would have been nice if this push had taken us a bit higher today though. But yeah, so similarly on the high time frame chart, I've got those 2 levels marked in. It's more cleaner, so the upper level is a 12-hour or 8-hour, 12-hour inside this big 4-day, 3-day supply, but still holding this local range. These are weak short zones, and notice, like, so the other thing I tend to like is when shorts coincide with where I did previously have longs. So obviously I previously had longs here, aggressive, slightly less aggressive, which got a bit of a bounce, but not much, before the bigger drop. And obviously this is where we had an original short zone. So overarchingly on this, we're at the top from earlier this year, back in March. We are testing. How did these lines come back? I thought if I took them off one, they were supposed to hide on everything, but anyway. Okay, so we're testing weekly supply, 2-week supply at the top of the 2021 move. So this is more of a possible ABC. So we you look at it on the linear chart, it just looks, so we're still at the point we could very easily make a double top here. So don't delude yourself that this is certainly going somewhere. We did make a monthly demand, so again, I did make the comment, I'll repeat it, from when we make a week demand, which is what we've done here. There are two options normally. I actually, to be fair, I haven't really assessed this on the monthly or the weekly. I've seen it a lot more frequently on the 8 hour and the 12 hour, so just bear that in mind. But it's possible that we just tap off the top of it and we just don't get that big a move, and we just go up and take out the monthly high that created it and not the high. This, in this case, potentially could keep going because Ether obviously has the ETF influence. But the other possibility is coming down, swing failing the low, and then waiting for the move. So just be aware of that. It is a weak demand, but we want to see that hold. Yeah, you can see here that it made a weak demand here. At least it had a bit of space before the retest, whereas this is an immediate retest, which is also less good. And then back, as I've said, making that comparison to 2019, are we just going to get one last move? And in this case, maybe that'll take us, maybe it will take us on a breakout, or maybe it will just take us into the final top section from 2021, perhaps matching that wick 44 as a top before a drop. And I know everyone's going to get very upset with me saying that, but you know, I like to look at both directions and what the options are in both directions. But cross that bridge when we come to it. For this point in time, we have giant monthly demand. We have a 3 week inside it. We may, what's this, 2 month? Maybe we'll create a 2 month. So actually, I prefer this 2 month if this created in the next 3 weeks. So yeah, we don't really want to be retracing all of this. We don't like the fact this is a monthly demand off a lower high. But yeah, so we're just looking for this to consolidate through here for potentially getting a bigger move. If it starts to close dailies inside this monthly demand, then then there's a much bigger chance that we're going to retrace significantly more of this range. So I think that's about it on Ether. So we're really just watching this. We want to hold this red box. This is where our supply is that could cause a problem. I also should comment actually, this was a 12-hour supply there. This wick didn't quite hit that 12-hour that I wanted it to there. So again, we could get, like I said, that monthly demand, then we come up and we take out the June high into this 12-hour supply. That is still a viable option. So I should probably mark that in there as well, and I probably have that on my other chart as well. So that's a very viable option, that we just come up and swing fail into this 12-hour supply on the second go. But locally, I'm just really looking as to what supply and demand's made. At the moment, we made it, so we're potentially not going to make a daily. If we close over here, we're going to make a 12-hour, new 12-hour. It's just a bit of a choppy mess at the moment on Ether. On Bitcoin, at least, we did make that 8-hour demand, which gives it a little more hope. CME is basically the same thing. It's got the monthly demand in here. And Korea the same too, but see, Korea's actually dropped a little more into that monthly, but Korea structurally is just a bit different, I think, because of the difference in the dollar. Like if you look here, this is the 4-hour that I'm saying my red box is coming from. This doesn't really have it, but if it did, it would be down here. So there is the chance that Ether Korea is going to come lower. And again, it just gives me, what I do like on those is that alignment. I prefer Korea to test the same places that the US dollar pair has. I don't always get it, but I often get it. But again, just be aware here that we've got a more bearish structure going on here. In fact, it looks like, yeah, so that already tested the 3-day supply. And yeah, the 4-day in here is a lot higher structurally. So I have put a comment, I think, on my alerts on here, so that while we've got that 4-hour alert and the 12-hour inside, I would like to see that confluence with Korea hitting the 4-hour at the same time, 4-day at the same time. And then actually haven't looked at CME on this, I don't think. So CME is going to make a 3-day supply unless it pumps in the next few hours. So again, that's going to give me decent confluence. That's going to be at 3,800, and that will give decent confluence for the upper short, this middle one. So that would be the one I'd be quite interested in looking at from a confluence with CME perspective if this 3-day here confirms. Anyway, I'm trying to be quicker than I normally am, so hopefully I'm not being too confusing. What else to talk about? Other thing is what the indices are doing. S&P obviously being the one we most watch with relation to Bitcoin. So this, unfortunately I didn't get it stupidly because I actually was watching it, but I don't know why I didn't put the alert on it, but I did put it in comments. So we made a monthly, this also created a monthly demand here, which it came off and made an all-time high, so it's not overly surprising. I think I put it in the comments on the short alerts. I said these were high risk because we had now come off the monthly demand, and yeah, as you can see, it's just gone straight through, made an all-time high, but it is now sort of being slightly indecisive as to whether it's breaking out or not. The weekly closed back below, so again, I put an alert for the new weekly demand here, but it's a weekly demand, and while we're pushing back over that previous week's all-time high level, we're coming up into 12 hours supply now. So this week we have CPI and FOMC, so obviously I expect probably these to do not much for the next couple of days, and then on Wednesday do something significant, so I just want to see. So if we do get a drift down into here before Wednesday, then we're probably going to get that up move. And what else? Nasdaq also, I think you can see, sometimes you can see Bitcoin follow that a bit more. It also made a monthly demand. It really did a very good job of faking out and looking like it was going to close. This happened on the Friday, or the Friday, or was it the 31st of May, or both? It was the 31st of May and was a Friday, but yeah, it sort of came all the way down here. It looked like it was going to possibly negate the monthly demand on the close before pumping up in the last few hours of the day. So whether we count that as a test on monthly demand, I'm not entirely sure, but yeah. And then has also made a new weekly, a stronger weekly than the S&P on here. So again, would like to see the next couple of days have this fall down into the weekly and then potentially get a bigger move later in the week. If Bitcoin follows, obviously then that will mean potentially Bitcoin follows that pump. I'm not necessarily convinced that will be the case. So while we are following a little bit, and you can see locally we had a sort of red candle on Friday here, which we also had on Bitcoin, but obviously this move wasn't matched on Bitcoin from the previous or earlier in the week. And we had the same on S&P, so Bitcoin sort of semi-following but not fully following. And ETF buying, as I said, just a sort of final comment on that. So I did go back and look at March. So we had, March is when we had the huge buying, and it was still, at this stage it was still quite heavily offset by Grayscale selling as well, but still we had this huge buying, and that still marked the top on the 12th and 13th. And I think it was actually CPI week as well when we did have the drop, so again that's just interesting, so just be a little bit careful. And then now again we've had all this heavy buying coming in from BlackRock, and I think it was the second one, IBIT, oh no, ARK I think is the next one, ARK, BTC. So I guess those first four I think are the bigger ones. ARK had some heavier buying earlier in the week, and then they dropped off and they actually sold, had some more selling. But really BlackRock are doing still the big buying through there. It did drop off on Friday, and we did get a little small amount of selling coming in on Grayscale again. So again, just interesting that heavy buying is coming in at the tops rather than at the bottoms. And we did have, I think, so let me have a look actually at when the recent bottoms were. So our bottom on the 1st and 2nd of May, and then let's say we had a bottom on the 10th of May, and maybe here the 23rd of May. Let me have a look at those. So 1st and 2nd of May, first was all selling, so I guess that was a blow off bottom with maybe them all selling the bottom, but they didn't then buy again. There's no buying, or there's some buying here. It came in on the 3rd, so they did start buying a little bit once price started going up, What did I say, the 10th of May? A little bit of buying, but mostly still selling. And the 23rd was another bottom. So, no, there was some buying on the 21st. So 16th through the 21st, 15th through the 21st. Actually, there was still some reasonable amount of buying. So have a look at when that was. 15th to 21st. Okay, yeah, so they did buy through some of this section up here, but again, most of the heavy buying is coming in at the highs. So yeah, I'm just, like I say, I'm not reading anything into that as yet. I'm interested to see, I will be amused if it falls. And then to find only all the ETF investors are stuck in at the top. That would amuse me. Anyway, let me just quickly look at alts, just for anyone who doesn't follow my chat, who should. I shared on, fronted nice. I shared on Friday in the chat my watch list of everything that had made new monthly levels of June. And so let's call this alerted symbol. So these are all the monthly. So if you want this, you can go in my chat. Some of them are very close to price, some of them are miles away, some of them are strong, some of them are weak. So I kind of made the disclaimer that obviously you need to do your own analysis as to whether they're strong or weak, if they've been tested already, etc. Blaze was one exception. So Blaze was something I've been calling all weekend. Annual demand on this. So just be aware, the things that have fallen down into significant demand levels are the ones that are going to get the big moves back up again. So Blaze is obviously one of the biggest gainers, and it's done that since the drop on Friday, so that's kind of nice. And then yeah, so if you go in my chat, you can find this watch list, or you can just copy it off here, pause the video. But this is everything that made, I'll just hide on my lines so you can see, so everything that made monthly demand, but they do range from strong to weak, so, and crazy like this. So PopCat's a very weak one. And it also has a massive wick, and obviously bear in mind the monthlies are very strong zones. They're strong zones, but they can take some time to play out. So Flocky, for example, had already hit before the drop, so actually the drop came later, and it dropped actually into a retest zone that I had. But so we got the monthly. I got an alert here for monthly hit, and then it's come into this 3-day demand on the next test. But yeah, go and have a look at these, and then these are the ones that are worth charting and keeping an eye on in case they're going to have a bigger move. PYTH was actually an earlier one, it wasn't a new monthly demand, but so it had hit the monthly, and we talked about it a few weeks ago. It was a weekly and then a monthly, but it still hadn't broken through supply. And then I had just an alert for the 4-hour demand here for that retest, which may or may not hold because it can obviously still go deeper into the monthly, but I'm looking for that higher low here, and that's it. So but I think the vast majority of them are new demands as of this month. So you're looking for test, come up, what does it do with new supply? Is it going to hold for a higher low, or is that going to push it deeper into the monthly demand? But that can just give you some ideas of alts to look at. And then, like I say, some of them are, most of them are local, but some of them are a lot further, a lot lower. But they're the ones to keep an eye on for any new sort of all season, I guess. And well, they're not separate them even from everything else. Actually, I've had alerts coming in. I had 70, 80 alerts come in when the dump happened. Despite the fact actually most things didn't dump that dramatically. Some of them failed, where I had more aggressive entries, and then we've got some of these are the more recent ones that have hit today and yesterday that I keep updated on this layout. So some are just coming into demands now. And as I commented on those others in total 3 charts, like it just depends whether these local demands are going to hold against this supply that's above. But like I said, the market's been really nice to trade both directions. Like this Arkham, for example, with a short there, and then it hits the long entry at the bottom. Sell, I've been trying to get shorts in for a while because I just think it's overextended. But again, we had another random pump last week. Here's one of the decent ones, and then it hit a 12-hour today. Miri is a new one that's come in. Omni is a new one that's come in. Again, I had longs on this, or I was calling this. It unfortunately didn't hit the didn't hit any long entries on this, but I was calling it, saying, and in the alert here I was like a 4 hours, like I'd like this to push down into the monthly level, so it's now made a 2-week demand, and it also has a monthly demand underneath, but I just alerted all-time high just to watch what it's doing. True is about to hit a yearly level, again just looking for that to fall down potentially into a new monthly demand down there. Yeah, so all the alts I think can just be traded as up and down within ranges and within structures. I mean, most of the zones are holding, at least holding small bounces, like some things are just crazy, like XM Harmer I think has gone through 2 or 3 alerts, but for the most part things are holding and doing what they're supposed to do and giving scalps or at a minimum off the levels, and then these monthly ones you just need to keep an eye on, because like obviously you can't enter every single monthly one. You need to be watching things like Sunday Front as an example, because obviously that's one that's taken off. Clean made a 12-hour demand, pumped straight off that. So you're looking for stuff on the monthly level, you're looking for some local demand to form that can give you an entry and then a tighter stop, rather than having your stop. Obviously you don't want to keep your stop below the monthly, like all the way down here somewhere. And then you're just looking for ideally that to make a higher high, because it's coming off a monthly level. Hopefully the coin won't go down and make them all fail now I've said all this. I gave Blaze as another example actually. So Blaze, I had the alert on the annual and we talked about that before the weekend anyway. Then I could see that it's made this trend line when I looked at it over the weekend, and I alerted the trend line for break up on that. I need to delete that alert now actually. So yeah, an alert there for crossing the trend line, and then it made a 12-hour level here which it tapped, and this would have been slightly harder because again, where's your stop going to go? But and then it's made a new 12-hour, so then there were hourlies and various things going on in here over the weekend, but then it, again, similar to Front, it's made a 12-hour demand there, and it's just tapped into it and it's taken off again today. TRX is something else you should keep an eye on, because that I've taken it off my layouts, but it's also something that I was liking. TRX can be one of the last things to pump before the whole market dies, so I won't bring it up now, but just keep an eye on TRX, because it hit a daily demand alert that I'd had a while ago. I need to bring it up there. Let me just show you, it's easier. TRX, still looking quite red down here, we're getting a mix of green coming in. So TRX had this daily alerted for a while, took days to actually break up off it. And I have thrown in a new alert for a daily there today, but yeah, so it had moved off the daily, but then when it came back down on the dump on Friday, it didn't go much further and has held for now a push potentially up into there or potentially higher. So I guess we'll see. Like I've alerted this weekly above just to see what reaction we get. But TRX can be a nice indicator of last minute pumps like EOS. And yeah, I was looking at the BTC pair as well, and it does have a monthly supply immediately above, so I'm not convinced this is necessarily going to get very far, but we'll see. See what happens if this can push through here, then obviously TRX is potentially going to have a bigger move, but again, nice down on the weekly demand there. That's kind of an interesting chart actually, but need to see how it deals with that monthly demand first. The TRX is something now that I've it's just quite a random coin, isn't it? Nobody really seems to call it anymore, but I kind of go back to it because I got it when it was like 44 sats, like when it was given away free on Binance. Obviously I then didn't know what I was doing and missed the high, and then ended up selling for very little profit despite the fact that it pumped a ridiculous amount. But yeah, this did come down into an annual demand, I think at the lows, that grey line. So then I started calling longs on this many times at the start of this recent run that we've had. A few shorts later, when I was like, TRX, how high can it go? And then it did just keep going. So yeah, we're looking for that test on the weekly supplies up here. Like if this is going to keep running now, having come down into weekly demand, are we going to get a new run, or are we going to get this just breaking down for the bigger breakdown, a bigger correction across the whole market? Don't freak out. You always freak out when I say big correction. Like, no, we're bull forever. I'm sure there were lots of people that said we were bull forever here. know, but I'll speak to you further from there. So really what we've done so far isn't really a massive correction in the grand scheme of things. It could be a lot bigger, so just be very, very careful. Don't buy into all the hype that says, you know, that puts risk reward tools in the chart with targets up at 35 or whatever. Yes, it's possible, but it's risky. And you just shouldn't be holding for that long. If you're a trader, if you're an investor, fine, but if you're a trader, then just, yeah, you don't want to be buying this now with targets up at 40, you know, 30, 40, whatever. I don't think, anyway. Perhaps I'm wrong, and that's up to you. You do what you do. Anyway, that is 1 hour and 5 minutes on this stream. At least I did a little bit of alts at the end. And now I can't remember what I had on this. I hate it when I forget what's on my layout. Oh, I think it was on. Any questions, give me a shout in chat. Like I say, go and look for that watch list link, and you can see the stuff that's interesting from a monthly perspective. And then obviously we've got things like like Brett, that are just going crazy, that are worth just trying to get in lower time frames on. Oh, actually I should have said on the short side, this one was one I wanted to get in on the short. We had a trend line break, and I said this obviously could go to zero if it wants, so it's quite nice. It's potentially a nice breakdown, but it really is being slow about it. So, and then it took a wick up, like I was saying, it looked like it was going to close below this orange level, where it did on lower time frames at the weekend, but then it wicked up while I was sleeping. So I don't know, maybe it'll resurrect itself from here. Don't really like calling bottoms, but I'm just watching this for the possibility of getting a short. But again, it's going to need the market to entirely fall. Might have a look at 3-day supply on that for a possible short. But yeah, keep an eye on this because this could give you quite a nice short. What do they say? New listings tend to drop like 95%. Let's see how much this has dropped already. Price range. Oh, that's not the top. Maybe it'll drop. I don't really put much stock in where these wicks start, but maybe it'll just drop to the start of the wick. But 95% would be quite a long way down. If we do get that drop of 95%, that's going to be down at around 0.0002. So that's a 10 times, one extra zero, a 10 times drop. But yeah, so keep an eye on that. Obviously now I've said that, it's going to end up being a descending triangle that breaks up. It's one of those anomaly things. This could be nice no matter which way it goes, to be honest. It's going to give a nice, I don't really like that width there. Maybe I'm just going to do a shorter trend line. I don't know, it's not a perfect trend line. But yeah, keep an eye on that. If that can't get back past here, then you can potentially get a very big short off that. If it breaks the trend line, it might fake out, break the trend line into here and then drop, so just keep an eye on what that might do. Quite like that for a short though. Anyway, I hope that is a useful stream. Nobody chatting to me, so hopefully you can actually hear what I'm saying. Levels that I'm interested in. The retest of that swing failure there was the one I added. But I've also got a higher one here on what's a 30-minute supply. Cross that bridge when we come to it. I might start, just be wary that if we start making daily or 12-hour demands down here, I might remove these. Because like I say, this is a monthly demand and therefore I am more bullish. So that's Ether, just showing you the levels, and then Bitcoin, 2 levels above the 12-hour, and then there's an hourly inside it. If we're going to make a lower high, and that's still a big if. If we do drop, then look at the weekly level, and then the 12-hour inside it, and this hourly section here. And then the immediate zones, if we start breaking those, I will do another stream and revise my opinions. I will also do another stream, where are we now, at 6:30, I'm not sure I'm going to do that tonight, but on the majors, I still need to, maybe I'll do that tomorrow morning, I still need to really have a think about them because yeah, my bias was just a bit all over the place on the weeklies and the monthlies. Did get some really nice entries on things though. BNB, decent size breakdown on BNB. Yeah, I really want to have a think about what these are going to do higher time frame, and I also want to look in more detail at the others chart and just see whether I feel like the others chart really is going to go lower. At this point I do think that. But again, I need to see this just push out a little bit higher out of this range, and then I'd be more confident that everything's coming down lower. Anyway, indecision. I hope that's of some use despite my vacillating and fluctuating. But at least I'm giving you levels. Like really, we just trade levels as and when they're hit, when we see the low time frames inside them. So that's really what you should be doing anyway. I'm not trying to predict where price is going. My bias is tentatively bullish. Well, definitely bullish based on very high time frames. Tentatively bullish at these levels, but would prefer a slightly more of a drop. And would like to see Monday's low taken out either by Monday or take out Sunday's low and just come down at least filling more of this wick before I want to get more bullish about things. But again, just need a bit more PA in here. Now we've had that initial drop, and the initial drop has held the immediate support. And as I say, keep an eye on Korea. Anyone who follows me who has access to this chart, I'll keep updating it. Would like to see that in this weekly. We'll see where the US dollar pair is when that happens, if that happens. So have a good evening. If you have any questions, give me a shout in the chat. Good night.